All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is DeSaros Umekawa, and I will be your instructor for the day. Today, this class is on capacitor management. All right, this course is designed primarily for pilots who want to understand how to maximize the use of what I like to call the most important part of your ship, your capacitor. We also know it as cap in EVE jargon. If you want to know what cap, capacitor is almost generally interchangeable as a term. Your capacitor supplies the energy to your modules, your weapons, your shield, your micro warp drive, your thrusters, everything other than moving your ship is going to be based on some sort of capacitor energy. So if you want to warp, yeah, you're going to need some capacitor. If you're going to defend or attack, you're going to need some capacitor. If your capacitor is empty, you might as well be a rock in the middle of space for what you're going to be worth. You're not going to be mobile, you're not going to be shooting or defending yourself. Essentially, you're going to die. So the secondary name of this class is also called Cap is Life. Right, there is a slideshow for this class, and I'm going to go ahead and post that slideshow right now. Understand that the slideshow may not contain everything in the class, but it will be a good guideline for what we're going to be discussing. As an instructor for EVE University, I have been playing EVE since 2006. I have some experience in pretty much every aspect of EVE, from PvP, missions, mining, industry, missions, exploration, wormholes, low-sec, null-sec, you name it. I've probably lived there for at least 6 months to a year. So I understand a little bit about what a capacitor can do for you, and I have screamed at my computer more than once because my capacitor was not full enough to do what I needed it to do. A few ground rules. As I was mentioning before class, I recommend highly that you be docked up in station. Please set your mumble to push to talk if you have not already done so. I see a couple people keying up. Please make sure that you're not using your push to talk key. And feel free to type any questions into the lecture.euni class chat as we proceed. I'll try to answer them as they come. At the end of the lecture, I'll open it up for more question and answers or general discussion. If everyone is ready, we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, now some of what I'm going to start with really has nothing to do with the actual gameplay. It's more game lore than anything else. Every ship includes a reactor, provides your electrical energy for your ship. Each race has a different type of reactor. Amar uses an antimatter reactor, Caldera uses graviton, Glenty uses a fusion reactor, and the Minmatar uses a nuclear reactor. Although they operate exactly the same way. Power from your reactor goes to your power grid and to your capacitor. Drakar, you are keying up. Please stop. Alright, so we were talking about your power grid. Now, every ship that has a fitting ring has some sort of power grid available to it. So shuttles are out, freighters are out, the special shuttles are out too. So pretty much every other ship has the ability to fit something to it. Capacitor and power grid are two totally different things. Power grid is used for fitting modules. So every module you link, and I'll link just a couple of them, like the small energy neutralizer or the Nosferatu. They all have power fitting requirements. So we'll open up the neutralizer, we'll click on the fittings tab, and it says that it requires 8 megawatts of power grid usage, and that comes right off your power grid. So if you have your fitting ring open, you go ahead and open up that now, your power grid is going to be displayed on the bottom of your fitting grid, and it'll say power grid on bottom. Your CPU will be up above it, so in the bottom half of your grid, you'll see that you have a power grid. Now some of you may have a very full power grid, some of you may have nothing in your power grid. That's completely acceptable. However you want to drive your ship is completely your business, whether you want to drive it empty or full. So power grid does not relate to your capacitor. I mean, literally in no function whatsoever. For all intents and purposes, it's just a second half of your engine. What the capacitor is, on the other side, is it's a reservoir of energy that stores that you can use to activate things on your ship. So while your reactor is powering your energy, your modules, through your power grid, turning them on requires a capacitor. It's It's measured in gigajoules. All right, if you need to know what a gigajoule is, I can link that to you. It's basically a large amount of flowing energy. It pulls an amount of energy from your capacitor. So, let's go ahead and take a look at the energy neutralizer again. I'm going to open its active attributes, and it'll show you an activation cost on line 3. Activation cost is 45 gigajoules. So if your capacitor has 45 gigajoules, you push the button, off goes your energy neutralizer, doing what it's supposed to do. All right, every module works the same way. You turn it on, it pulls energy from your capacitor, and at some point your capacitor is going to recharge. But we're going to get into recharging just a little bit later. The maximum amount of energy your capacitor can hold is its capacitor capacity. It's an amazing simple term for what it explains. You can increase it by skills, modules, rigs. Some drugs do it temporarily. So that's something that you can affect. Recharge rate can also be improved by skills, rigs, modules. Some implants can improve your recharge rate as well. And we're going to get into that and the math on how those work a little bit later as well. Your capacitor is going to have a natural recharge rate. So if you have no modules, no fittings, nothing affecting it, it's going to have a natural time of recharge. So you use a module, it's going to start recharging your capacitor. You have ways to affect that. Like I said, we're going to discuss a lot of how we affect each of these a little bit later, but this is the basis of it. You have a capacitor capacity, you've got a recharge rate, and that's based on a natural recharge rate assigned essentially by the ship. Certain ships recharge faster than others. Right, capacitors in the fitting window. So let's take a look at your fitting ring again. I suppose I better get into a ship. That'll do. Okay, so we're looking at the ship, and you can see your capacitor. It's going to be the very top section. Now, if your capacitor is designed like mine, you probably run a very hot capacitor that runs out in about 5 minutes. That sort of thing happens. So, assuming everybody has their fitting window open, does anybody not have their fitting window open? Very good. We've got people saying 1 minute, 50 seconds. These are people who like to live dangerously. Can't blame them for that. Okay, so right at the top, you've got your capacitor readout. Mine's reading 3,750 gigajoules with a nice little slash over 1,230.19 seconds. So basically, if my capacitor were empty, it would take 1,230 seconds to recharge to approximately 98%. I'm also flying a command ship here, so I got probably a bigger command grid than most. Right underneath that is your excess recharge rate. Basically, it tells you how much over or how much under you're recharging. So I've got a minus 8.7 gigajoules, which means I'm running at a deficit, which means I'll always overrun my capacitor if I have all my modules on. And it tells me a percentage. Now understand that this is based on if you have every module on your ship running. It's not for sure. It's not a definite thing because some of the modules on this ship I don't necessarily need to turn on. I don't need my tank unless I'm being shot at. I don't need my weapons unless I'm engaging. Right? My command boosts are probably always going to be on, so that's going to be something I need to worry about. But it tells you, if you have running everything on your ship, that that's what you're going to need. If you're trying to figure out whether your ship will be cap stable under a certain situation, you can actually offline certain modules from your fitting window, as long as you're docked up. If you do this in space, you're likely to turn off something you can't turn back on, so make sure you're docked up when you do this. And then you can see, say I don't use my tank, I can offline these two modules, and now it raises me to 11.5 minutes active. Take off my guns, which I can do that, and it drops it even further. So in a boost configuration, not using my tank, just my 3 command modules, my capacitor is stable. I actually show an increase of 1 gigajoule per second, which is means I'm running right on that ragged edge. Does anybody have a question about how you can do that from your fitting window? All right. So we have fitting tools. We've got EFE, we've got PIFA, and those will also give us a half-decent way of looking at it. All right, depends on which program you have, because everybody uses a slightly different mathematical algorithm to debate whether recharge rate happens at this or at this. And if you're interested in the math, I got a great link for you. The math is well beyond my mathematical capability. Seamus has his own theory, so he's mathematically capable on this. So for all you math wizards out there, there's some tasty love for you. So while you're using your capacitor, just know that if you're using a fitting tool to determine what goes in your grid, it may be slightly off, depends on which program you use. If you want a good kind of idea, use both and see what you get in the middle. There are plenty of experiments. If you want to move to page 7 on the slideshow, Kavina had put together this amazing graph. So there's a lot of a difference in here about what people think that the capacitor recharge rate is, but the graph is pretty close. You can see that the capacitor starts recharging fairly slowly before speeding up its recharge rate. So basically, oh, hi Kavina, what are you doing here? That's my boss. Just ignore Kavina. Anyway, Kavina wrote this amazing chart, and it explains how, at the very beginning, if your capacitor is full, it's going to have a very low recharge rate. But as you start using that capacitor, it's going to start ramping up its recharge. And at some point, it's going to break even. And I believe it is just about 25%. Some people say 24%, but that's the love spot. That's where you're going to have the maximum capacity. If you're pulling past your capacitor in the 25 range and you're dropping down to 23, you are murdering your charge rate. Once you hit 23, 22, you can see the graph literally nosedive back down towards the 0 line for recharge, and that is not a good place to be. That'd be a good time to stop shooting if you're shooting that tank, or I don't know, consider warping to your safe spot. Get your pod saver ready because you might need it in a minute. All right, so there is a lot of math in here, a lot of it that I don't quite understand. So the basis of it all is as you start using your capacitor, it starts increasing, and once you hit 25%, that's where it peaks out. And then lower than that, your capacitor is pretty much in a nosedive. So you might want to go rescue that thing. This is without any other factors, by the way. So if you're not receiving energy from somebody else, if you're not being neutralized, if you're not being vampired or doing some vampiring, this is going to be the standard. Now, those things can affect how your capacitor works, especially if someone's sucking the energy out of you. It's likely to be even worse. If they're giving you energy, then you might have something going on there for you. Just know that if you're on your own and you're trusting your own capacitor to its own needs, 25% is just about as much as about as low as you want to go. Moving on to slides 8 and 9. All right, a cap-stable ship is one that essentially demands that your modules not exceeding their recharge rate. So all the modules fitted to your ship, if they were all turned on, you would never drop below that 25%. Your capacitor would always consistently, continually keep your ship running. Now, in general, that means that your cap will never drop below 25%. Simple enough, all right? We talked about peak capacity recharge being at 25%. If you can't get below 25%, you're going to be cap stable. A lot of argument between being cap stable good, being cap stable bad. Well, here's some of the facts behind it. A cap stable configuration means that you can turn everything on, and unless somebody comes and starts sucking energy off of you, your capacitor will keep you going forever. You can be cap stable and still run at a cap. Like I said, neutralizers, vampires, these things will cause it. Overheating will also change your cap stability. Overheating causes some modules to cycle faster, which means they're pulling more capacitor off your battery. You need to understand that. In PvP, since war is coming, I mean like a real war is coming, engagements cap stable is not a necessity. In fact, sometimes it's a detriment because what your cap stability is, you're thinking the long haul. Most PvP engagements don't last the long haul. They usually last about 5 minutes. So why do you need a capacitor that runs anything less than 5 minutes? Well, there you go, or any more than 5 minutes. So we're looking at modules that are increasing your capacitor, trying to make it recycle faster. They become unnecessary in a PvP situation. Put another damage booster in there, or put another defense module in there. Something that your 5 minutes is just about up. All right, so if you weren't going to make it in 5 minutes, you're probably not going to make it in 10. If, however, you're looking at a PvE environment, something that's missioning, going out and running missions, and you know that you're going to be slow boating level 4s, that long-term capacitor stability is going to be critical for you. All right, that means that you're going to be you're in it for the long haul. You already have the mission details because you went to EU Survival and looked up the mission. You know that they don't have neutralizers. You know that they're not going to be doing anything super easy to your cap, so you know that you can set it at 27% and use all your modules and slow boat through. You can do that. So then you can add those cap rechargers and the cap flux coils and the relays. You can make your capacitor what it is. You can fit the rigs and the modules to do it in plants to make yourself successful. It's all about how long you intend to fight. Incursions last 10 minutes. PvP usually 2 to 5. I've done level 4s that took me 50 minutes to an hour. That's the choice you get to make. How far out do you think you can run with your modules? So keep asking yourself as you go through these, what do you need for the mission? So just make sure you understand that. All right, so energy transfer modules. We talked a little bit about those. I'm going to bring them back up again as soon as I find the box that I put them in. All right, no, that's a neutralizer. That's better. All right. An energy transfer module basically says that I'm going to use X energy and I'm going to send it to someone else. Under normal circumstances, this is a fairly inefficient process. All right. Just like the one I linked here, activation cost 38 gigajoules, amount received 30. So I'm losing some energy in there somewhere. Now, if I'm cap stable and somebody else needs it, I turn this thing on. Well, I might be helping them out. Most people, under normal circumstances, don't rely on capacitor transmission to stay cap stable. Very few circumstances. Logi chains use them to boost energy. They can create energy through a cap chain because they get bonuses on cap chain sufficiency. That's really one of the only uses that I've seen about it. I'm going to see what the slideshow has to do on that. Yep, uses the skill of capacitor emission systems, just like it says in the slideshow. CCP, ignoring the first law of thermodynamics, that's cute. Like I said, logi chains are about the only thing that works. It's just a matter of how you use energy transfer. All right, so let's talk about making your capacitor better. Improving your performance is somewhat an arcane science, and trust me, when you look at the math that I just posted in that link earlier, it does seem somewhat arcane. Modules and skills affect your ships in different ways than you think that they might. The equation on page 11, if you've all got your slideshow up, is basically how capacitors stats affect your recharge rate. So let's take a look at that. You see the two numbers. You've got your fitting window open, you've got the number on the left, which is your capacitor size, and then you've got your capacitor recharge time. And as you can see here, the math goes times 2.5 is approximately your peak recharge rate. It's going to happen right around 25%. Increasing your capacitor increases how much you recharge per second. Decreasing your capacitor recharge time does the same thing. So it depends on how you want to do this. I like to look at it as a fraction. So if you look at with the slash, you've got the gigajoules on top and the seconds on bottom. If you're raising the top and you're lowering the bottom, that's exactly what you should be doing to this fraction. So when it divides out to be a smaller number. On page 12, you can see how the math goes through it. If you're raising one and you're lowering the other, it increases your recharge rate. It works the same way as shield tanking does. You increase your shield number and you lower your shield recharge time. So if you're looking for shield information, this is basically the same. It's a little different because they use different modules and skills, but that's the gist of it. All right, so the 6 ways that we can improve capacitor and performance of capacitor is skills, and modules, and rigs, implants, drugs, and just knowing how to use your capacitor. So we're going to go through those individually as we go down this list. So page 13 and 14, if you please. We'll start at 13. And believe it or not, there are 17 skills that help non-capital pilots improve their capacitor. All right, some are directly related, some are more module-based. So if you don't ever want to use your sensor dampeners or remote boosters, well, you don't have to train that particular skill. The rest are very important. So the big 3, capacitor management. 5% to your total capacity per level. Recommended level 5. Okay, I'm recommending level 5. The university is recommending at least 4 so you can get off the ground. Capacitor systems operation. Direct 5% reduction to your capacitor recharge rate. Again, the university recommends 4, I recommend 5. Those 2 alone are going to help your ship be capacitor stable in most every situation. That's all you would need. Just those 2 skills. The rest of these are going to be module related or action related. And the first action that most people do on a daily basis is warp drive. Operation reduces your percent use per level. So you can almost cut your capacity. You can cut it in half if you have it to level 5, warping between place to place. X up if you have ever fallen out of warp between 2 locations. Everybody in this room. Yeah, bloody retriever, absolutely right. Yeah, retrievers are the worst. So that is, yeah, well, 90 AU is huge, especially if you're in something like, I don't know, freighter. Goes a long time. Yeah, coveters. Yeah, barges tend to be the worst. So warp drive operation will help you reduce the amount of energy you have to suck out of your capacitor just to get from point A to point B. All right, so specific module relations. All right, we have controlled bursts, which reduces your capacitor use for hybrid and energy turrets. You note that that doesn't say projectile turrets because they don't use capacitor to shoot. All right, they kind of get that cheat going in there. I think it's like 1. If I recall correctly, to fire a projectile and 0 for missiles. Fuel conservation, 10% reduced cap for afterburners. All right, so if you like to go fast, this will help you go fast without tearing up your capacitor. High-speed maneuvering, 5% for micro warp drives per level. All right, so how many of you are, don't X up, please don't X up, but all the tackle pilots, this is the one you need. Propulsion jamming, 5% reduction to warp scrambler disruptors and stasis webifier needs. If you're going to be a tackler, you're going to want this skill trained well, because those modules tend to eat your capacitor up pretty good. Having that reduces it by up to 25%. Shield compensation. For those of you who like to use shield boosters, you know exactly how much capacitor those grubby little modules can suck. They are greedy. That's the the price of turning your capacitor into a shield. So understand, 2% less level might not seem a lot, but 8%, 10% cuts your amount down quite a bit. Jump drive operation. Now this is a subcapital thing only if you're flying like a black ops ship. Or a capital ship. All right, capital ships all have jump drives. Well, okay, almost all have jump drives. 5% reduction for the capacitor use to initiate a jump. If you don't have a jump drive, this skill may not be useful for you. So for those of you who haven't been in the university for more than about 6 months, this one can wait. And those are all your module related. Now we've got some other things. Logistics. For all you Logi pilots, Tech 1 Logi pilots are like, my heart goes out to you because you guys do some amazing things in ships that shouldn't be doing amazing things. And I appreciate that. All right, good question. Does distance affect how much cap is used? 90 AU versus 300 bookmarks? Absolutely. Let me see if I can find that. Kavina, you still hiding out there? Do you have a good answer on how we calculate how much capacitors used to warp? Okay, so I'm quite certain that warping shorter distance uses less capacitor than longer distances. Otherwise, you wouldn't cap out at all. So we'll just leave it at that. I will find that answer before the end of the day, though. Trust me on that. All right, so here's some skills that Logis work. Energy emission systems, 5% reduction for energy emission weapons, neutralizers and Nosferatus. Those are weapons. All right, they go in your high slots and they attack other things. Those are also considered to be hostile acts. Don't just go stealing energy from people because if you're in high sec, you will be concorded. Make sure your safeties are set. All right, so non-weapon systems, remote armor, remote hull, and shield emission systems. They all work on individuals, so all three of those skills work on whether armor or shields or hull repair, which does happen. 5% reduced capacitor need for those particular modules. So if you're running armor logi, you want armor repair. If you're in shield logi, you want shield repair. If someone out there is hull tanking, I don't know. Your best judgment. Let them go or whatever you need to do. I've never been a big fan of hull tanking, though I oddly hull tanked my Archon for the longest time. Okay, E-War related. You've got electronic warfare, sensor linking, target painting, and weapon disruption. Those four reduce your 4 E-War types. You've got ECMs, that's your electronic warfare. Sensor boosters, sensor dampeners, that's your sensor linking. Target painters, my favorite. Target painters are target painters. Weapon disruptions for tracking disruptors, and it's amazing stuff. All right, basically they just help they help reduce the cost for your ECM. So if you're out there flying a jammer, a jammer Blackbird, which I'm going to get ready to do, these skills are critical for you keeping your cap up. Cornelius says real men hull tank, and Cornelius has lost a lot of ships, so you do the math on that one. Thanks, Cornelius. Appreciate you calling yourself out that way. So, are there any questions on capacitor skills? Guy on triple tanking for the win. I would highly recommend that you look over some classes that discuss multiple fitting strategies for a single chip and see how far they really get. Or you might end up in that same boat as Cornelius there. All right, so that we use, and all of this will allow you to use these modules. So before you go try to fit one of these modules, make sure that you look at the module and understand how your skills allow you to fit it. So we're going to go ahead and start with stacking penalties. Now, for those of you who understand stacking penalties, modules that affect power grid, CPU, and capacitor are not affected by this. Alright, so you can use capacitor recharger 1s as often as you want. They're basically multiplicative. They don't actually impose on the stacking penalties. So let's start with your capacitor booster. That is a capacitor booster 1. It's a mid-slot item, and basically what it is it runs on ammunition or charges that literally take a charge and it injects it into your capacitor. Basically, it's plugging a new battery into your capacitor and having it work off of that. It has to be loaded, so when it runs out, it's got to go through its 10-second reload cycle. It's got to reload, and it depends on what you want to put in it. You've got anywhere from 25 gigajoule charges to 800s if you're running the big ships. Exactly, like throwing coal into a fire. Helps stoke the fire a little bit. Next, you've got recharge enhancing modules. This basically just improves the recharge rate of the module. Or, I'm sorry, of your capacitor. So, Cap Recharger 1. Take a look at that bad boy. It basically improves your recharge rate by 15%. All you got to do is plug it in. It's actually a very low CPU, low power grid use, so almost any ship can use it. I actually have a couple of these on my capital ship as well. The Tech 2 version, not this one. Cap Power Relays. Now this one's a little different module. All right, so you take a look at this module and it says it improves your capacitor recharge rate by 20%. What it does, however, is if you're a shield booster, it actually reduces your shield boosts by 10%. So essentially, it's stealing from your shields to recharge your capacitor. Oh, question. Is it better to have 2 capacitor rechargers, 2 capacitor batteries, or a combination of both? That is completely situation dependent. If you're knowing you're going into PvP and you honestly need the extra cap, batteries are much better than rechargers. But I'd actually consider not even using either. It really depends on how you're looking to be cap stable. There's a mathematical point at which more is better than less for each one. I recommend you use your fitting tool and find out which one works better for you before you go out and buy these things. Chappie, no, it doesn't mean you have less HP on your shields. It just means that if you have an active shield tank, if you're using a shield booster, it'll reduce the amount of shields it recovers every cycle. Good questions. Alright, next we have what we call the capacitor flux coil. This one's a little tricky. Earlier I talked about raising the recharge rate on your ship involved essentially increasing the amount and decreasing the recharge time. Well, this little module can actually work against you a little bit, because what it does is it reduces your total capacitor by 10% and increases the recharge rate by 21. Now, if your math looks good on there, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you actually may be reducing the amount of capacitor recharge you get on your ship. I highly recommend that before you start using flux coils, that you take time and you've got to see if it works on your fitting tool. I have had it nerf ships on its own. So this one's kind of a tough module. So if you're not sure, take a look first. In almost every situation, except for shield tanking, the power relay will be much better. All right, so you asked a question about capacitor batteries, and that's a good question, because what a capacitor battery does is it actually just improves your capacitor size. So there's you a capacitor battery, and it improves your capacitor by a static number, 75 gigajoules for that one. It also comes with some neat little bonuses about people using energy neutralization and vampire on you. As you can see in this module, it reduces the amount of neutralizer damage by 7.5% and 15% for vampire for the Nosferatu modules. So those are pretty handy if you know you're going up against an enemy that likes to nos and neut. They can help diminish some of that. Just keep that in mind. It works pretty well in my opinion. It's a fairly new effect if I understand it. All right, so the last module I want to talk about that increases, basically it fixes everything, is this bad boy. This is my all-purpose favorite module in all of EVE. It's a power diagnostic system. It's got neat things. It increases your capacitor by 4%. Recharge rate reduces it by 7.5%. Both of the things you need to improve your capacitor. It also does it to your shields. And it increases your power grid by 5% as well. So I'm a big Drake pilot. This thing fixes all my problems. Running active modules fixes some of that. Shields fixes some of that. That's why these are also very expensive at Tech 2. They're ridiculous. So it fixes a lot of things, and it comes at a very small cost of 20 CPU. So if you are coming up real close but not quite for what you're looking for, think about one of these, because it fixes a lot of things, and it does it very, very minimal in fitting. One low slot, 20 CPU.
And what's the name of that?
That is a power diagnostic system. I love power diagnostic systems. They're great. Okay, so do you have any questions about modules or skills that I haven't covered? I think Cornelius is trying to make fun of me because I'm a Drake pilot. I also think that Cornelius is jealous because I can solo level 4s in a Drake, even after they nerfed it. Okay, so since we've got all the questions taken care of, let's talk about rigs. Alright, so every ship has starship modification slots. Right? T2 ships have 2, T1 ships have 3. Well, except for shuttles, because you can't modify them, and freighters either. Alright, so your rigs are designed to help change the function of your ship. Now, jury rigging is required to do any rigging. And you got to get to level 3. So there are actually some rigs that just require jury rigging. They don't require anything else. And I think one of those is capacitor control circuit. It's kind of nice. It actually, let me see if I can find one. I'm going to talk about someone who can't type. That'd be this guy. Well, that's what they're called. So capacitor control circuit, I'm going to try to pull up the stats on it here real fast. It actually simply reduces the recharge time of your capacitor by 15%. This one requires Mechanics 3, so we'll move into that. It costs 100 points off of your calibration. Hey, yeah, thanks, Imp. I appreciate that. And it basically improves your capacitor recharge time. That's really all it does. Rigs come in Tech 2 versions just like modules do, and they are much more heinous to fit. The Tech 2 variation being 150, but it does reduce your capacitor recharge time by a full 20%. The next one is your semiconductor memory cell. Let's see if I can get this right this time. Yeah, that thing. Alright, and what this thing does is it basically increases your capacitor by 15%. Both of these things you kind of want to do. But like I said earlier, when it comes between 1 of 2, 2 of 1, or 3 of all, whatever you need, use your fitting tool to figure out what you need. Because if your fitting tool is telling you that one way is obviously better than the other, and that fits what you need for your mission, go ahead and go with that one. Every module is mission specific in Eve. Even guns, they're mission specific. I don't have to shoot. I don't use a whole lot of guns on freighter missions. Alright, so in some situations you may have finding more cap at the beginning better than a faster recharge rate, like PvP. Using batteries and the semiconductor memory rigs are much more efficient. Missions, you probably want that higher recharge rate. Like skills, there are other rigs that basically decrease capacitor need for modules. So we've got the remote repair augmenter. Those are for your Logi pilots. They just basically reduce capacitor need for remote repair. The dynamic fuel valve, it's for micro warp drives and afterburners, decreases capacitor use. Warp core optimizer reduces your capacitor need for warping, no more halfway across the system. Signal disruption works ECM module. Egress port maximizer decreases the capacitor use for energy emission modules. I'm going to have to look into that. And I think that is energy transfer modules. Core defense capacitor safeguard for you shield tankers out there. It reduces the amount of energy that your shield tank needs to work for active shield tanking. So if you're using a shield booster, it'll reduce the cost for that. Discharge elutriation. It decreases energy weapons and hybrid gun use. So for the UMR shooters with the laser guns, and you Galente and Caldari with your hybrid guns, you can decrease the cost on those as well. Any questions about rigs? Rigs are kind of expensive in my opinion. They get ships blown up a little faster, the ones I use. Oh, no questions. Very good. Let's talk about implants. All right, so for those of you who have implants, this may actually be helpful for you. If you already have implants, it means you've trained cybernetics to level 1. And if you're using those ability skill implants, your willpower and your charisma, those are in your slot 1 through 5. And those are your attribute enhancement implants. That's what they do. They improve your skills. Now, there are special versions of these out there made by the pirate cartels and the syndicate, whatever they're doing, that improve other things. But for now, let's just talk about the basic ones, the ones that go into your slots 6 through 10. Skill hardwiring, and they're designed to help actions. For the purpose of capacitor, we have a couple that are really good. The Squire line, Squire Energy Systems operation, is a slot 6. It reduces your recharge time by 1 to 6%, depending on where you found it. M800 series is, hang on for a link. I didn't get many links thrown at me. Alright, so we'll go back to that. Energy operations, and Ken got energy management, so both of those are pretty good. As I said earlier, the energy operations is designed to reduce your recharge time, and the energy management is designed to improve your capacitor. So those are both good for that. You can actually implant them both because the energy systems operation is a 6. Energy management is an 8 for slots, so they don't go in the same hole in your head. It's weird to talk about. I get that. Alright, so if you're looking for specifics, you've got the warp drive operation rig, or implant. These are so hard to find. Alright, this one works your warp drive. Anywhere from 2 to 12% reduction for capacitor usage for warp. Repair systems. It increases your ability to improve armor and hull repair by 1% for that one. There's like 15 of these. Holy crap. I do know that you can also use your fitting tool to find most of these and figure out what exactly you'd like to do with them. And they're really nice to do. You've got the Lancer controlled bursts, reduces capacitor usage for turrets. Another one reduces for energy systems. It's a slot 7, doesn't stack with other slot 7. I would recommend, let me see if I can link some of these. Got one for remote armor. One for shield, if that's your thing. E-War. And that's just electronic warfare modules. That's not remote sensor dampeners. I mean, sensor dampeners have their own. Weapon disruption, target painters, they have their own. High-speed maneuvering. It's got one of its own. And there are a couple for capital ship pilots as well, but they're kind of pricey. And I'm not going to worry about those for right now because this is more focused on the wartime. So let's pick up on page 20. Alright, so next we're going to talk about ship bonuses. Alright, so we've got some ships that are out there. Slideshow on page 20. You've got Starship Command reducing certain things for certain ships. I'm going to go ahead and get me my list of that up here right now. And then we've got boosters as well. Boosters are drugs. I don't do drugs, so that's like probably why people blow me up a lot, because they're probably on drugs. Anywhere from 36 minutes to an hour, up to 3 to 20%. The Mind Flood, and I do believe that there is one that's technically legal in HiSec, which is the synth version. It's kind of a pain. I don't like them, but they have side effects, and I'm not a big guy that does that. And some of these have side effects of reducing your capacitor capacity. So you might be improving your recharge rate and nerfing all of your bonus by reducing your capacity. So I recommend only doing that if you absolutely have to. Stronger boosters, the synth version doesn't have a negative effect. Okay. Like I said, I don't use drugs. There's some other drugs that have potential side effects for capacity reduction as well. So be careful using them. Most people use these in low sec, null sec, and they're really PvP pilots. They don't need the extra capacitor use or the capacitor recharge. They usually use the other ones that improve agility and essentially damage types. So those are your boosters, and I have very little experience with boosters, so I'm not exactly the authority on them. I spent a year in nullsec, and I did not like boosters. I never got into it. At all. To do further. Energy upgrades to level 3, capacitor control circuit rigs, cap recharger 2s make a big difference. PvP focus, however, just like with buffer tanks, you want to buffer capacitor. You basically want that capacitor to be as big as possible. You just want it to last as long as it can. You're not worried about the recharge rate of it. Engagements, especially solo engagements, you're looking at 1 minute, maybe 2. So instead of fitting those extra recharge modules, let's put some weapon damage modules on there, or some tank modules, whatever you might need. I mean, if you're playing bait, you're probably not going to be running a whole lot of hot weapons, but you're going to be running them expensive armor mods. If you're worried about lasting an hour in a fight that's only going to last a minute, you've probably overfit. Right? Different modules improve different things. So I listed a whole bunch of different modules. You get your cap power relays, your cap flux coils, you've got your reactor controls, your micro auxiliary power output, you've got your PDS modules. Each one of these things do a very different thing. And understanding how to get the best out of your ship is just a matter of trial and error. And using that fitting tool not only is trial and error, but it's free. It doesn't cost you any ISK to do that. Tech 2 comes at a higher price. It usually gives a higher bonus, and it's slightly harder to fit. But they are going to be unquestionably better than their Tech 1 versions, unless you're willing to shell out a bunch of money for a Meta 4 module that'll do essentially the same thing. It's worth training the skills to the Tech 2 levels, because not only are you getting the Tech 2 module, you're getting your skills worth out of it as well. If you're going to fly faction or Dead Space modules, think about the outcome. You could be flying the best faction or Dead Space adaptive armor nanomembrane that you want in an interceptor and get blown up real easy. Sure, you're out a 700 million ISK module. Sure. Especially if it drops, then you get to frown a little. Or you can put that thing in a capital ship that's designed for it. If you're going to fit big things into small ships, you get to weigh the risk of whether the loss of that is going to be worth it. If they can scan your ship, they can see that you have it, and they may blow you up just for the chance of that module dropping. So you want to get ganked, fly expensive things and things they don't belong in. Your call. We'll leave that up to you. Alright, modules affect your cap fairly well, especially weapons. Lasers eat capacitor. That's what they do. Beam lasers are the worst. Blasters, second worst. Alright, it's what they do. Railguns, on the other hand, are less capacitor sucky than blasters. They don't drain as much. But they don't do as much damage either. But they have that longer range. You can get out there and touch someone a little bit easier. Missiles and projectile weapons are your capacitor's best friend. They don't even look at your capacitor. They go straight for the bang, and there they go. Take a look and see what you've got. All right, some people fly different ships with different bonuses to capacitor for their weapons. Consider that when you go choosing your ship. So a ship that gets a reduction in capacitor use for lasers might be a real bonus compared to a ship that doesn't, especially if you're looking for that extended capacitor use. Your choice of weapons can make a very serious difference in how much your capacitor uses. Keep that in mind. Exactly, like the Oracle. Modules that you don't need right now and are on eat capacitor. Let's say, for example, you get into a system, you know you're getting ready to go run a mission, you're in high sec. There is no good reason to turn on your shield tank until you get to the mission location. More specifically, until you're getting shot at on the mission location. So they do eat up quite a bit. Try not to use those. Micro warp drives. It's kind of neat how you use them. So you know when you use a micro warp drive, it increases your signature radius by 5 1/4 times what it's supposed to be. So if you turn it off, when you're getting close to your max speed, you're going to have that coasting time. That coasting time is time you're not pulling power off of your capacitor, you're not as big as a planet, and you're still flying at a fairly decent speed higher than your normal speed. You're going to go faster and slower, but it's pulsing your micro warp drive, or your afterburner in this case. Could be the difference between you actually being cap stable or you just leaving it on and sucking out your cap. As a matter of fact, you can do it for any model on your ship. So if you're talking about like weapons, you can turn them off for 5 seconds. Let your capacitor get some recharge time in there. That's the difference, all right? Is it going to be constantly pulling power, or is it going to have a down cycle where it doesn't pull? These are some of the tactics that you may need in longer engagements, especially if it's fleet versus fleet. Sometimes you're flying around, you're not being primaried, but you got your shield tank on just in case. Turn it off, turn it on, afterburner off, afterburner on, whatever it might be. Those are all things that you can do to keep your capacitor running. If you are in combat, make sure that if you need to get out of combat, you do so before your capacitor drops to 25%. I'm not saying you won't warp off, and I'm saying that you might even get the benefit of having such a low capacitor that they can't follow you, because you fall out of warp halfway to your target. Right? That might be a bonus in some cases, but in most cases, after that 25%, your capacitor recharge drops like a stone. You're not getting any capacitor back. Your tank turns off because your warp drive just sucked out all your batteries. It's best just to get out of there while you still have the power to make it. All right, now many of you are aware that people have these things, energy destabilizers and NOS module. I love them. These things are fun. All right, you've got energy destabilizers. They call them newts, or neutralizers. Basically, they take capacitor out of you, and then they take capacitor out of the other guy. Nosferatus actually steal energy, but they only work under a particular situation. If your current capacitor is less than theirs for absolute cap, then you steal something. If it's more than theirs, your Nosferatu does nothing. All right, you have to have a lower capacitor than they do in order for that module to even work. So if you're not running on the red line, your neutralizer or your Nosferatu is not going to make a difference. All right, NOS is a defensive weapon. Neutralizers are offensive. All right, so if you're trying to offset the amount of an energy neutralizer, a Nosferatu will do it. Do not count on these two modules to sustain your capacitor. They are designed to make the other guy upset, not to make you better. That is the simple, simple, simple answer. They have really short ranges, too. I mean, you pull up an energy neutralizer, what is it, 5,250 meters? So if you like the point-blank fight, that's fine, but you're going to be flying a ship that's designed for it. Small Nosferatu, 5,500 meters. It's what it is. All right, you don't want to be up in their face trying to do energy vampire, hoping it's going to sustain your cap. That's energy warfare. You're literally trying to deplete their capacitor by depleting their capacitor. All right, and that is a form of war. I've been in combat, so I mean the curse is the worst at it. You get in there, curse newts you down, you're done. So understand that there are ships out there being flown that are designed to do this. They're designed to kill your cap, and then you, because cap is life. We talked about that before. Last, we've got neutralizer drones. They're fun. Okay, this one's kind of big, and I get that. But this guy's fun. 125 gigajoules per cycle, neutralized. A flight of these, now they're slow. I mean, it's a big drone, but they'll get it done. You just don't rely on them. If you have the drone skills, you can tweak their capacitor just enough that they thought they were good, and now they're not good. So it's another type of energy warfare. If you're interested in energy warfare, get into this class. Learn what you can. At this point, I'm going to link the Capacitor Warfare Guide. And that's the fun part of capacitor warfare. That Is a great question. Kavina, how does that work? I know you're here. Maybe Kavina left. Does anybody have a good answer for that? Does the vampire module drain your capacitor if it's percentage less or number less?
I believe it's number-wise, not so much what your capacitor is, but how much recharge you've actually got on there. And that's how it works it out.
And that's what I thought, and that's why I said absolute cap. So I do believe it is number less. Thank you for the time on that. Okay, so I have reached the bottom of my page of things to chat about. Normally there'd be some sort of practical, go out there and use modules, but we're at war, and I don't want to, get anybody blown up because of a class. It's terrible reason to get blown up. So, do anybody have any questions? Okay, question is sustainable at N%. What does that mean? I mean, is this the percentage number percent? Is this percentage rated to 25% peak recharge rate? So I'm assuming you're scrolling over your excess capacitor recharge?
In fitting window, there is this, yeah. When you hover your mouse over this capacitor icon.
Right. That would be the ideal point where you're going to actually stop having to go any further. When it says, I just stabled mine out. It says it's sustainable at 31.7. It means that under normal circumstances, my capacitor would never drop below 31.7%.
So can it be less than 25%?
No, because after 25%, your capacitor stops recharging at peak efficiency, and you'll break over, and it'll actually start recharging less, and you'll be unstable.
Okay, thank you. That was what I was thinking of.
All right, let me see if I can find another question here. So a vampire on a small ship will almost always work when it targets a capital ship. Very likely, yes. And the capital ship probably won't even notice. And like I said, though, if you're looking to let your energy vampire be your primary against, being running out of a capacitor, what you're hoping is that the fleet supporting that capital ship doesn't come and remove you from the board. All right, semi-off-topic question. The fittings for ships we find on the web page, have they been optimized for their respective jobs, or their meant as a general guideline when it comes to cap? General guideline. Every fitting on there is based on a lot of testing, a lot of demonstration, and a lot of field practical application. The issue with those fittings is that they're not going to win every single time. They are not the best fitting because every fitting is situational. If you know that your role as an interceptor, you're going to need cap to keep your point on, and at the same time you have to pulse your micro warp drive to keep orbiting at a speed they don't blow you up. That's your choice. I mean, you have to choose whether you want to adjust your ship to be more capacitor stable, or if you want to be the person responsible enough to pulse their micro warp drive. So general guideline. Good questions. Any other questions? No other questions. That's uncommon. Okay. All right, well, I think I'll go ahead and then... here we go, 2 questions. Perfect. All right. New in Cap is terrible problem. Any easy fix for a stealth bomber? If you're stealth bombing, you shouldn't need a whole lot. Skills are a good answer, absolutely. Tech 2 modules definitely help close up the cap. I mean, are you actually using it as a bomber or as a missile platform? I guess that's my question. Okay, well, in a bombing capacity, you're going and you're dropping a bomb, you're cloaking up, you're warping off. So warp drive operation is going to be critical, and making sure your bookmarks are good. No, I just have good bookmarks, good approach angles. When you're using it as a missile platform, your missiles don't use capacitor anyway. So really, it's your warp, it's your approach, whatever you're using for afterburner or micro warp drive. Those things are going to be the ones that help you with your capacitor. Okay, I guess I don't understand why you have a point on your bomber. Okay, you're running solo then. Okay, I get that. I think that there are better ships to run solo than a stealth bomber, I suppose, but you're basically using a ship outside of its practical, normal purview, so you're going to have to expect some difference between power grid or capacitor, your CPU, something you're going to have to give. There is no perfect ship for every operation, and you are trying to use a ship slightly outside of its normal use. Sorta. I think it's rather brave, though, that you're using a stealth bomber for a solo tackle pop. I've seen it done. I've seen videos where people would decloak and get crazy and launch missiles and bombs and get nuts, but that's totally different. All right, so what was the next question? Cornelius, how can you fly a Drake when there's better ships out there? Simple answer, I already own the Drake. Andre, I saw that same video, and I think I understand what's going on here. Yeah, it's probably not a good idea to be ganking people, especially as a member of the university. Kind of runs that gray area of piracy. Fair enough. All right, any other questions? All right, well, I do appreciate you all attending the class. This is the formal end of the class. If you have any questions, please ask me after class. I have no problem with that. I appreciate your feedback. If you have any feedback about the class, please send me an email. Let me know if you've got any criticisms, whatever you'd like. Good luck, fly safe, go out there, and go make somebody's capacitor a living nightmare. I'm all about that. And thank you for attending. Have a great day.